Not once, not twice, but 3 times tariffs have been pushed off from Trump onto Canada and also subsequently Mexico. Mexico, as the people like to call it. And this is where we're at 3 times. 3 times. And it makes me think of George Bush, who once said, "Fool me once, shame on you."
Sorry.
This guy can't get the bit. Fool me once, you won't be able to do it again. And that's exactly what we're seeing here with Donald J. Trump. We look here in the Financial Post. Canadian dollar gets boost on Trump tariff comment. Mexico's peso and Canada's dollar got a boost after U.S. President Donald Trump signaled the deadline for levies on goods from both countries would be pushed back yet again, raising investor skepticism over one of the U.S. leader's signature policies. The peso strengthened as much as 0.9% against the U.S. dollar, and the loonie briefly erased losses after Trump said tariffs on Mexico and Canada would go into effect April 2nd versus a previous deadline of early March. Later in the day, a White House official said the deadline remains March 4th and that Trump has not yet decided whether to grant another extension. Interesting how that's the case now. We don't know what's going to happen moving forward. We're hearing word on the street that it's getting pushed again. It likely will get pushed again. And this is what happened. I read this news and I'm like, okay. It's one thing happens once, it gets announced, and there's like, all right, we don't want to go that far yet. We got to see some change here, Canada. And Canada's their thing. And it gets pushed a second time. You're just like, okay, something's happening here. When it gets pushed, or at least signaled that it might be pushed a third time, then you're just like, okay, now this is starting to look bad on Trump. What is happening over in the White House? What is going on? And to talk about all this, I have Reg here with me. What is going on, Reg? What are you seeing out there?
What we're seeing right now is February 2nd, it was the first deadline. Now we're seeing that he's saying, March 4th is when this is all supposed to come into play. Now we're looking at April. Okay, why are we pushing this off again and again? Because we're not hearing anything from our fentanyl czar. We're not seeing any real movement on any of the things that he's asked for. I mean, Trudeau's pledged. This is the other thing, too, that I had to correct, because I know that we said it a couple times, and mainstream media has been saying it. Trudeau is spending billions of dollars at the border. It's like, no. He's pledged billions of dollars. They put some drones out there. They got a few people excited about some Black Hawks. Aside from that, the money is still kind of like waiting to go to that. It's not like he just dropped it all out there. So as far as it actually goes, we haven't really done a whole lot to really satisfy what Trump has asked for. And I know we're catching a little more of fentanyl, a little more of the drugs that are supposed to be going across the border. So what I'm looking at is what would be the reason why he would actually delay? And what's happening is that Trump has actually positioned himself as a man of prosperity, right? He's told the American people, we're going to reduce the inflation that you're feeling. We're going to make it affordable in America again. You're going to be prosperous. You're going to be able to own a home. You're going to be able to do all these things that you had. We're going to restore the promise of America. We're going to make America great again. So what doesn't make America great? When the interest rates go way back up and when you start to see the cost of living go right back up. So I think one of the things that we're seeing right now is that if he starts tariffing the oil and the energy that's coming into the United States from Canada, that's going to send the cost of living up for the American people. They're not going to be happy about that. And all they're going to see is that Trump put these stupid tariffs on our ally, and now we're paying for it. So, I mean, they're not going to be paying for it through the nose, granted, because our dollar is so low that they're not really going to feel it as much, but it's going to be enough that they're going to see a little bit of a bump. And depending on what Canada does, it might bump it up even a little bit more. I know that Danielle Smith's don't touch our oil, don't touch our energy. She might get overruled by the federal government. Who knows, right? So I think that we're seeing this play out in the markets too, where anytime Trump managed to put that message of tariffs out there, the stock markets actually went down. And so he's looking at that going, crap, we don't want to see a rise in bonds because we actually want to see economic growth in this country. So he's looking at these tariffs going, I just need Canada to do what I want you to do. and let me not use these tariffs because I just need you to do what I want you to do. And so that's what I think is happening right now.
Yeah. It goes back to even what happened with the Five Eyes intelligence story that came out earlier this week, where Navarro's, an advisor close to Trump, planted and threw the idea out there that we cut off Canada from the Five Eyes intelligence. And then Financial Times reported on it, followed up with Navarro. He's like, I didn't say that. Wasn't me. And then you find out, this is how Trump's administration typically plays things. And Trump does it himself, where he'll throw things out there and just hear what the feedback's going to be. And if it's positive, then he might push on with it. If it's negative, he's like, all right, we'll pivot and go somewhere else. It was very much intentional that story got planted the way it did earlier this week in terms of the Five Eyes. Got serious pushback even from the likes of Steve Bannon. And so there's like, okay, we're probably not going to do that. And so I'm starting to see the same thing with this. Is you said it yourself there, Reg, where he throws the idea of tariffs out there, then says he's going to implement them, and then he watches what the markets do. He's like, okay, shoot, how am I going to do this? How are we going to make this happen? Because I know I want to make sure that I don't like that our banks get locked out of Canada. I don't like that our telecoms get locked out of Canada. Quite frankly, I hate all the tariffs they put on us because we can't compete. Our companies can't compete in Canada, such as, like, I think it was a 246% tariff on dairy. It's all intentional on our end. We lock out the Americans pretty hardcore from our country to our detriment in a lot of cases. And so I think that's what we're seeing Trump do. We're seeing a lot of rhetoric, throwing things out there, seeing what breaks, seeing what moves forward, and seeing how he can manipulate and push Canada, ourselves, into doing what he wants us to do without it being a detriment to him.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, he's got economic advisors around him who are very bright, and they're going to look at Canada and say, okay, Canada's in a very vulnerable state right now. They've got, was it $400 and $500 billion worth of mortgages that are going to come up for renewals. Canadians are not buying things the way they used to be. Discretionary spending is actually down year over year, 3 years in a row. He's looking at this going, Canada's in a vulnerable state right now. What can we poke at Canada right now that will allow them to make concessions and allow us access into the markets? Because exactly what you said, it's about business, right? He's looking at the fact that, okay, if we can't use tariffs to bring about prosperity like I had campaigned on, basically, I'll use them as a way to say, here's the wedge, and then, like you said, insert American companies into Canadian markets that have traditionally been locked out. There's no way he's getting into the dairy side of things. There's no way.
No.
Quebec won't let that happen. Mm-hmm. I mean, Quebec was threatening to set itself out as its own economic entity if they even tried. Yeah. But the big thing is, like, the banking system, which he mentioned, and then also the telecoms, which telecoms 100%, I think that would be wonderful for us. I know that what that would mean, though, is it would mean a change in jobs, I think, too, where you'd see a lot of telecommunications companies start to shed their employees, because if you add more competition in the market, you will probably gain some jobs there where they would have to have Canadian bases and Canadian, companies on the ground where they do sales and service in Canada. But I do think that you'd see a lot of jobs leave Bell, leave Rogers, leave TELUS. And so it's one of those things that's like, I don't know how that would play out, but it would result in lower rates for all of Canada. And because we saw it happen in Saskatchewan when SaskTel came into the picture, people were trying to get those Saskatchewan numbers because they went, holy crap, here's a different company. It was a provincial company at the time. I think it still is. Mm-hmm. But basically, that provincial company forced all the rates to get lower because everybody was looking at them going, well, if the government there can provide that service for that price, why are we paying twice the amount here? So the same thing would happen with American telecommunications companies coming in that are offering things at way lower rates. Same thing with banking. What happens when the American banks come in and start offering way more innovative products and better products for Canadians? You'd start to see things happen in the country. And I actually think you might see some growth in other new startups in that industry too. So I do think that it could be a net positive for Canada, but that's what he's looking for, because he can say, even if we can capture a portion of that market share and steal it from Canada, then that would be a net gain for America. The problem is that would also be a net loss on our GDP and would drive us further down in towards economic recession. So it's just like you win, you lose, you win, you lose, and they're seeing that, right? So, and I don't think that the people who are advising our government are stupid either, and they see that. So that's why you have this weird Cold War happening over the tariffs.
Yeah. And it makes you wonder, right? He says, formally, he says, no, it's still going to happen February here, but it's going to be pushed to March. It's still going to happen in March here. It will get pushed to April. And that makes you wonder, why not push to May? Because we know likely what's going to happen here is Mark Carney is likely going to win the leadership for the Liberal Party. He's going to have to call an election right away because we know that he can't allow for much time to go without an election happening, because the more he's out there in the media, the more people realize that he is not the guy for the job. So he's going to call that right away, March 10th. And so that means we'll see an election here mid-April, mid to late April. So I'm also thinking there's also a play here in terms of the next administration that Trump wants to work with. And I'm curious if he wants to do himself a favor, he might push this off into May and not allow this to be, or at least not allow it to be a chip for the Liberals to use in their campaigning.
See, that's where I'm not sure. Okay. So
I think he wants the Liberals to push around the Liberals.
I think so. In the sense that, I think that he hates the Liberal Party. He hates Freeland. He hates Trudeau. Not a fan of Jolie. Like, I think that he's not a fan of them, and he likes watching them kind of, squabble. Yeah. But the thing that I'm wondering is that I don't know if Trump would want to negotiate with Poilievre. Poilievre is not Trudeau. Poilievre is smart. He's quick. So I don't know. Like, they're aligned because they're both conservative, so they would share some values on capitalism and free markets and trade and et cetera, and resource extraction obviously being a big one. However, like, I don't know how much America would gain from that conversation with Poilievre. I think it would be challenging for them in that way. But yeah, it's one of those, I don't know.
It's tough because, like, there's two things to it, right? Where you have a net zero leader in there, then you're going to be able to take all of our industry, which is very attractive to somebody like Trump. However, you allow someone like Carney in, or not allow, Carney gets in, Liberals are continuing leadership. You're still inviting China to be at your borders now.
Mm-hmm.
We've still done nothing about the Chinese police stations up here. So it's like, which one do you really want, Trump? Do you want someone to push around and, make sure they push this green economy and then you can take all of our industry in the process? Or do you want to not deal with China being at your borders? That is probably something that is going back and forth in the White House right now.
Oh, definitely. Mm-hmm. And I wonder, like, how much, because, like, if I'm Trump, honestly, and I'm looking at America, if I was cold, I would say, I don't give a rat's about Canada. I just want their stuff. I want their business. I want their money. I want their resources. I don't care if China walks all over them and makes them, the next province of China.
The 27th province of China.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So if I was, a cold, calculated, cruel person, and I'm only self-interested in United States, it wouldn't matter, right? So, but if I was looking at Canada and going, okay, how do I get the most bang for my buck here? I don't know. I don't know if it's Carney or if it's Pierre, honestly. Pierre, you might actually get some pipelines built though, like Keystone XL, flowing that oil directly from Alberta into the US. So that might be a win. And then also if Pierre starts opening up some of our critical minerals, then we might be able to give those to the States at a bargain price, because we're already doing that with our oil. So it wouldn't be too far of a stretch for them to imagine us doing the same with our uranium, our cobalt, our lithium, our everything. So, you know what I mean? It's one of those things where it's like, I don't know.
Yeah. So I want to push back a bit on what you said about, if I was just focused on the US, I wouldn't really care about Canada. But like, what happens between China and Canada is actually very important in the United States, because we have, again, the largest unmanned border, or something, whatever that term is, in the world. So if you allow China to do their thing, it's a lot harder of a border to lock down. They're already having a hard enough time trying to lock down the Mexican border. How are they going to lock down the Canadian border? So I think it's much more prevalent and important for them to have a good relationship and work with Canada to get rid of the foreign influences. Because if they don't, they're not going to lock down that border. It's too big and it's too vast.
Yeah, but I don't think that you're going to see a problem with China like trying to come across.
We're already seeing it. What are you talking
about? Like I don't.
We're literally watching it happen right now. What do you mean?
We're watching immigrants come across the border.
No,
we're watching drugs go across the border. But I don't think you're watching I don't think you're going to see China move into Canada and then down into
That's
the
not
States.
what I'm saying, though.
Okay, what are you saying?
So China's working with their influence. And it's all of what we're seeing right now is a Chinese influence campaign. And that's all they want. They know for a fact they can't win a war with the United States man to man.
Yeah.
This is all purely to undermine the West. So if they get cushy with Canada, they continue to push their resource or their influence through the drug trade, through the money laundering, using Canada as a launch pad to be able to do that. And then if the border's weak as it is, they're not catching a lot of these drugs that are going in the United States. So they continue to kill Americans as they kill Canadians. And I think that is a very important issue for Trump, as he's highlighted in this whole time as well. And that will continue if he allows a liberal government to continue.
Yeah, fair enough. I guess what I was saying is I don't think you're going to see the movement of troops or people.
Oh, no, definitely not.
That's what I was saying.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But I think it's a mess, honestly, when you look at it. And I think that, to go back to the main point, though, him flip-flopping on these tariffs, I really think that it's really, really challenging for him. I think the thing that would benefit him most would be to allow access into Canadian markets for business so that he doesn't have to use these tariffs on Canada. And I think that when we talked about critical minerals, critical connections between the US and Canada, I think the other thing that we don't really talk about a lot that is important to mention is water. Like, we send so much water to the United States.
Yeah.
Like, we shut off that water, the whole state of California dries up. Mm-hmm. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that there's some other pieces there that are also, like, we send water, we send oil, we send a lot of things to the United States. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting.
I just want to link back to quick before we finish off here about what we were texting about, where you have the issue of, you said it yourself, where I don't think Trump realized how connected the two economies really were. And as soon as you start applying these 25% tariffs, he doesn't realize how much of an impact it's having on the stock markets, what's having in the overall markets in general. And that's bad for America. And I just don't think he realized how much that was going to happen.
Yeah. And I think that was part of the reason why when Daniel Smith went down there, that was the first delay.
Right.
Because I think that he went in there, he's like, it's just free money coming from other countries. We can just pick it up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Tariff all the way.
Yeah.
And I think she kind of like put the fear of God into him, like, hey, listen, here's the actual state of things with oil. You don't want to do this, sir. And that's why 10% oil and 25% everything else.
Yeah.
And so I totally think that. I think that he's not realizing it. And to go back to even what we said at the beginning of the show, it's a, F around and find out kind of situation right now. He's testing the waters. He's trying to see what levers he can pull, and he's hoping that Canada bends, and they haven't so far. So does that mean retaliatory tariffs are working? No. like we said, you can't, put a tariff on whiskey and be like, "Where we did it."
I showed them.
Exactly. People aren't buying it.
Yeah. And I think also last point is the issue where, so right now we're seeing where he, did a deal with Ukraine to pull out half $500 billion worth of critical minerals from Ukraine. And right now what we're seeing is how much debt the United States is in. And right now they're seeing how much waste has been going out the door. They're trying to shrink that all up and trying to shore up how much money they can actually collect. And I think that's what they're trying to do through these tariffs. And I think you said it in your text earlier to me, where he's scrounging to get cash to get some income coming into the United States that isn't tax money. And he's trying to figure out which way he can do it. And that obviously was a big part of why he did the deal with Ukraine, what he's been trying to put the pressure on us. But it's he's trying to do it with everyone. You're seeing with Greenland. It's all a huge resource game, but as well as trying to get income coming in the country.
Yeah, and I think that's why he's so interested in talking to Russia about ending that war in the Ukraine. Ukraine sits on a lot of minerals, right? So, and they don't have all the same stupid rules that we have in Canada to unlock them. So it might actually be faster, which is wild to think, to go across the world to go get those minerals in an active war zone than to get them out of Canada. And so I think for him to actually move that border to where he needs it to be so that they can access the minerals under the ground there, that's a huge economic interest for the United States. And that's probably why they're not letting Zelensky in on these conversations. And it really is how are we going to carve up this war-torn patch of Ukraine that, has some really valuable minerals under there that frankly Putin wants. It was never about denazifying Ukraine. Putin wants the stuff that's under the ground in Ukraine.
Yep. And we're seeing it live. And I wish we could go on for another 20 minutes on it, but we won't. We love you guys. Have yourselves a good one. We're out.